First contact and the laughter. The air on the alien planet felt different. It was thick, humming with energy, almost alive. Captain Daniel Carter took a deep breath and stepped into the massive city square. Around him, tall buildings of smooth black stone reached toward the violet sky. Strange symbols glowed on their surfaces, pulsing like a heartbeat. The streets were wide and clean, lined with floating lanterns that emitted a soft blue light. All around him, the aliens watched in silence. They were tall, elegant creatures with shimmering silver skin and dark, intelligent eyes. Their clothing was smooth and flowing, moving as if woven from liquid metal. They spoke to each other in hushed tones, their voices musical, like wind chimes in a storm. Daniel adjusted the translator on his wrist, but it only hummed with static. The device, designed to pick up and translate any known language, was failing. He was completely alone in a world he did not understand. Then he did something reckless. He spoke. It wasn't English, nor was it something he had been taught. The words simply flowed from his mouth, natural and effortless, as if buried deep in his memory. The alien crowd gasped. Their glowing eyes widened. Whispers spread through the city square like fire. And then she laughed. The sound was rich and full, carrying a strange warmth that sent shivers down Daniel's spine. A tall alien woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was different from the others. Her silver skin had a faint blue tint, and her eyes glowed brighter. She studied him with amusement, arms crossed, her head tilted slightly. "You," she said, still chuckling, "are not supposed to be able to do that." Her voice was smooth, perfectly spoken, without the need for a translator. Daniel's heart pounded. What did I just say?" he asked. The alien woman smirked. "You spoke our language. Perfectly." More murmurs filled the air. The other aliens seemed nervous now, some stepping back as if he was dangerous. "I don't understand," Daniel said, shaking his head. "The translator isn't working. I've never learned your language." The woman's smile faded slightly. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "And yet, you spoke it like one of us." Daniel swallowed hard. Something wasn't right. He had been to many planets, met many species, but this had never happened before. The woman glanced around at the watching crowd, then back at him. "Come with me," she whispered. "Now." Before Daniel could respond, she turned sharply and walked away, her long robe flowing behind her like liquid silver. He hesitated, but the murmuring crowd made him uneasy. Some aliens looked fearful. Others looked angry. His instincts screamed at him to follow her. He moved quickly, slipping through the crowd, his boots making soft taps against the smooth stone floor. The alien woman led him down a narrow alley, away from the city square. The hum of conversation faded behind them, replaced by the quiet rustling of the wind. After several turns through the twisting passageways, she stopped in a shadowed corner, facing him. "You are in danger," she said in a low voice. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. "Why?" She studied him for a long moment before answering. "No human should be able to speak our language. It is not just words. It is more. A connection. A gift passed through blood." Daniel frowned. "Are you saying I'm not human?" She let out a slow breath. "No, but you are something else. Something our rulers will not accept." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had thought this mission was simple: establish first contact, learn their culture, and make peaceful communication. But now, it was clear he had stepped into something far more dangerous. "What do they do to people like me?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked up at the sky, where a faint shadow moved among the clouds. A large, sleek ship was hovering above the city. "They erased them," she said quietly. Daniel stiffened. "Erase." The woman met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You have two choices," she said. "Stay here and face them, or come with me. And maybe, just maybe, you'll survive." Daniel clenched his fists. This was not how he had expected his mission to go. But his instincts told him that standing here, waiting, would be a mistake. "All right," he said. "Let's go." The woman nodded, then turned and moved swiftly through the alley. Daniel followed, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on his back. The hum of the alien city had changed. Somewhere behind him, the whispers had stopped, and that silence felt far more dangerous. Secrets of the alien woman. The city behind them faded into darkness as Daniel followed the alien woman through the twisting alleys. The smooth black stone of the walls reflected the faint glow of the floating lanterns above, casting eerie shadows. The air was dense with an electric charge, as if the city itself was alive and watching. Daniel's mind raced. He had just spoken an alien language without ever learning it. The crowd had reacted with shock, fear, and something else, something closer to reverence. And now he was running for his life. The woman moved quickly, her silver robe flowing behind her like liquid metal. She barely made a sound as she walked, while Daniel's boots echoed against the stone ground. Finally, she stopped in front of a curved archway that led into an unlit tunnel. She turned to him, her glowing eyes sharp. "You need to understand something before we go any further." Daniel caught his breath. "You keep saying I shouldn't be able to speak your language. Why? What does it mean?" The woman studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she placed a hand against the tunnel wall. The stone shimmered, and the air around them seemed to ripple. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dimly lit chamber inside. "We don't have time for all the answers," she said, "but you need to know this. Our language is not just sounds. It is power. It is something only those of royal blood can speak naturally." Daniel frowned. "Royal blood?" She nodded. "The rulers of my people. They passed down a gift, a connection to the old ways. The language holds knowledge, energy, something more than simple words." Daniel crossed his arms. "And you're saying I just— what? Unlocked this ability?" She hesitated before answering. "Or maybe you always had it." A cold sensation crawled up Daniel's spine. That didn't make sense. He was born on Earth. He had no alien ancestors. He had never even heard of this species before today. "That's impossible," he said. The woman sighed. "Perhaps. But if it were truly impossible, you would not be standing here." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What does this mean for me?" She stepped closer, her gaze intense. "It means you are in great danger. The rulers will not accept you. They will see you as a threat. They will erase you." Daniel stiffened. "You said that before. What does erase mean?" She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "They will rewrite your mind, remove your identity, turn you into one of them." A chill ran through Daniel's body. Mind control, brainwashing, or something worse. "And how do you know all this?" he asked. For the first time, the woman hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Because I was supposed to be one of them." Daniel's breath caught. She turned away and walked deeper into the tunnel. "Come, we must keep moving." The underground passage twisted downward, leading them into a series of dimly lit corridors. The walls were smoother here, polished, reflecting the soft blue glow of crystals embedded in the ceiling. As they walked, Daniel noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, the same language he had spoken earlier. But when he tried to read them, his head throbbed. The words were there, floating in his mind, but they were just out of reach. The woman noticed his discomfort. "It will come in time," she said. Daniel exhaled. "You haven't even told me your name." She glanced at him, then said, "I am Ceres." Daniel nodded. "Well, Ceres, where exactly are we going?" She stopped in front of a metal doorway. It was old, covered in dust, with deep scratches running along the surface. Slowly, she placed her hand on the center of the door. The metal hummed, then slid open with a low hiss. Inside was a large chamber filled with alien technology. Floating orbs of light hovered near the ceiling. Strange holograms flickered in the air, displaying maps, star charts, and unreadable data. In the center of the room stood a group of figures dressed in dark robes. Their silver skin reflected the dim light. Their eyes, glowing and sharp, turned toward Daniel. Ceres stepped forward. "He spoke the language," she announced, "and he did not need to learn it." The figures exchanged looks. Then, the tallest one stepped forward. "If that is true," the figure said, "then he is either a miracle or a weapon." Daniel tensed. "I'm neither," he said. The figure studied him. "That is not for you to decide." Ceres stepped between them. "You know the prophecy," she said. "A human who speaks our language naturally. This has never happened before. It means something." The figure's glowing eyes narrowed. "It means he is dangerous." Daniel clenched his fists. "Look, I don't know what prophecy you're talking about, but I didn't ask for any of this." Ceres turned to him. "And yet here you are." The chamber fell silent. The weight of unseen forces pressed down on Daniel. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. He was now part of something far bigger than himself. And whatever it was, it had already begun. Escape and the hidden truth. The chamber remained silent, the weight of unseen judgment pressing down on Daniel. The group of robed figures watched him with piercing eyes, their expressions unreadable. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric, like a storm waiting to break. Ceres stood beside him, her posture stiff, her fingers twitching slightly at her sides. Daniel didn't know if she was nervous or preparing for a fight. The tallest figure took a slow step forward. "You do not understand what you are," he said, "and that makes you dangerous." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I didn't ask for this. I don't even know what's happening to me." Another figure spoke, this one a woman with deep violet markings across her silver skin. "Your very existence is a threat to our order. The rulers will not allow it." Ceres narrowed her eyes. "Then we have to move quickly." The tallest figure, the apparent leader, stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and pressed his palm against a glowing panel on the wall. A deep hum vibrated through the room as a holographic map flickered to life. It showed the city above them, but beneath it, a complex web of tunnels and hidden chambers stretched out like a forgotten maze. "We have been preparing for this moment for a long time," the leader said. "The prophecy spoke of a human who would awaken the old ways. We always assumed it was a myth." His glowing eyes locked onto Daniel. "Until now." Daniel exhaled sharply. "You keep talking about this prophecy, but no one's explaining anything." The leader nodded to Ceres. "Tell him." Ceres hesitated before speaking. "Long ago, our people and humans were connected, not by war or trade, but by something deeper." Daniel frowned. "Connected how?" Ceres took a step closer. "Through the language, through something ancient, something powerful." She gestured to the glowing symbols on the walls. "Our language is not just words. It is memory. It carries knowledge, energy, history. It is a bridge between minds." Daniel shook his head. "That doesn't explain why I can speak it." The leader spoke again. "Because you are not the first." A heavy silence followed. Daniel's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" he asked. Ceres took a slow breath. "There were others, humans who could speak our language long ago, but they were erased." Daniel stiffened. "Erased? How?" The leader's voice was grim. "Their minds were rewritten. Their history erased from the records. The rulers feared what they could become." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He wasn't just an anomaly. He was a reminder of something the rulers wanted buried. A deep alarm suddenly blared through the chamber. The holographic map flickered, and glowing red symbols appeared across the screen. "They found us," one of the robed figures said, their voice tight with urgency. The leader's face darkened. "We need to move. Now." Cirrus grabbed Daniel's wrist. "Come on." They ran. Through dim tunnels, past ancient doors and forgotten corridors, the underground refuge trembled with distant explosions. The enemy was coming. Daniel's mind raced as fast as his feet. He wasn't just in danger, he was hunted. And for what? Because he spoke a language. Because of some old prophecy. Cirrus led him through a winding passage, her movements quick and precise. She knew these tunnels well. The others followed, their robes flowing behind them like shadows. Ahead, a massive doorway loomed. The metal was ancient, covered in strange markings. Cirrus placed her hand against it, and the symbols pulsed with light. The door rumbled open. Beyond it lay a vast chamber filled with towering pillars of crystal. A strange blue mist hung in the air, shimmering like liquid light. Daniel slowed, his breath hitching. The energy in this place was different. It buzzed through his skin, into his bones. "What is this place?" he asked. Cirrus turned to him, her eyes sharp. "A sanctuary, and the last place they'll expect us to go." The leader of the robed figures stepped forward. "We have to move quickly. If they breach the tunnels, we won't have much time." Daniel could still hear the alarms echoing through the passages behind them. They weren't safe yet. Cirrus led him toward the center of the chamber, where a raised platform stood. The crystal pillars surrounded it, humming softly. "You need to understand something," she said, her voice urgent. "This language, our language, was meant to connect us. Not just through words, but through thought. Through memory." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" Cirrus met his gaze. "I'm saying that if you can speak it, then somewhere inside you, there are memories that do not belong to you." Daniel's breath caught. Memories. His dreams. The visions he had been seeing since he first spoke the alien words. They weren't just random flashes. They were something real. The leader stepped forward. "We can unlock them." Daniel took a step back. "Wait. Hold on. You're talking about messing with my mind." Cirrus shook her head. "No, the memories are already there. We're just going to show you the truth." Daniel hesitated. Could he trust them? Could he trust her? Then the tunnel behind them shook. A distant explosion sent dust raining from the ceiling. Cirrus grabbed his arm. "We don't have time to doubt, Daniel. If you want answers, if you want to survive, then step onto that platform." Daniel clenched his fists. He was standing at the edge of something much bigger than himself. A truth that had been buried for centuries. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The power within. Daniel stepped onto the platform. The moment his foot touched the smooth surface, the air around him shifted. The crystal pillars pulsed with light, sending waves of energy through the chamber. The blue mist thickened, swirling like a living thing, wrapping around him. A deep hum resonated through his bones. Cirrus and the others stood back, their glowing eyes locked onto him with anticipation. Daniel swallowed hard. His instincts screamed at him to step away. But something inside, something deeper than instinct, kept him rooted to the spot. The robed leader raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Close your eyes." Daniel hesitated, then obeyed. The hum grew louder, reverberating in his chest, his mind, his very soul. Then, a rush of images exploded in his head. A sky filled with twin suns, a vast city of golden towers stretching beyond the horizon. A people standing together, their silver skin reflecting the light. A voice, distant but familiar, whispering words he did not understand. Yet somehow he did. His breath caught. Then the images changed. Flames, screams, a war fought in the depths of space, ships burning, entire worlds crumbling. A betrayal, a great leader falling, a council of shadowed figures watching from the darkness. A decree, erase them, erase the truth. No one must remember. Pain stabbed through Daniel's head. He staggered, gripping his temples. The hum turned into a roar. Memories flooded into him, but they weren't his. They belonged to someone else, someone who had lived thousands of years ago. His breathing became ragged. He saw himself. No, not himself, but someone who looked like him. A human, standing beside the alien rulers, speaking their language as if it was his own. A warrior, a leader, a traitor. Daniel gasped and fell to his knees. His mind burned. His body trembled. Cirrus rushed forward. "Daniel, what's happening?" He clutched his head, his fingers digging into his scalp. I don't know. I see things that aren't mine." The leader of the robed figures stepped forward. His face was grim. "He is remembering." Cirrus's eyes widened. "Already? But that's impossible." Daniel gritted his teeth. The memories wouldn't stop. They kept coming, crashing into him like waves. The first humans who came to this world. They were not explorers. They were rulers. They stood beside the aliens, not as visitors, but as equals. As something more. But something had gone wrong. A betrayal. A war. A purge. The humans were wiped from history. Their names erased. Their existence reduced to myth. The aliens who supported them were either destroyed or forced into hiding. And now, centuries later, he had awakened it all. Daniel's eyes snapped open. His body still trembled, but his mind felt different. Clearer. More aware. The air around him was thick with energy. The crystals still pulsed, but now they pulsed with him. He could feel them. Their energy, their rhythm, their language. He understood it now. He staggered to his feet, his hands shaking. He turned to Cirrus, his breathing uneven. "I know who I am," he whispered. Cirrus stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Daniel swallowed hard. His voice was raw. "I'm not just some human who randomly spoke your language." He turned to face the robed leader. "I'm connected to this, to all of this." The leader nodded solemnly. "Yes, and now the rulers will come for you." Daniel clenched his fists. He felt something inside him. Something new, something ancient, awakening. A power that had been buried for centuries. A power that had been forgotten. But he wasn't forgotten anymore. He could feel the truth settling in his bones. He wasn't just a visitor to this world. He was a remnant of a lost legacy. And the galaxy was about to remember. A deep boom shook the chamber. The ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Cirrus spun toward the doorway. "They found us." The robed leader's face was grim. "We do not have much time." Daniel turned to him. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" The leader met his gaze. "Yes. The moment you spoke the language, they marked you for death." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Then we need to go." The leader hesitated. Then, for the first time, his expression softened. "No, you need to go." Daniel frowned. "What? No way, I'm not leaving you all behind." Cirrus touched his arm. "Daniel, you don't understand. They're not coming to capture us. They're coming for you." Another explosion. The chamber walls cracked. The crystal pillars flickered. The leader placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We will hold them off as long as we can. But you must escape." Daniel's heart pounded. He hated this. Hated running. Hated leaving people behind. Cirrus grabbed his wrist. "Come on. There's another way out." He clenched his fists but followed. They ran through a side tunnel just as the chamber behind them erupted in fire. Daniel looked back only once. The last thing he saw was the robed figures standing tall, their hands glowing with power, as dark-clad soldiers stormed into the chamber. Then the tunnel sealed behind them. The escape passage twisted downward, deeper into the underground. The air grew colder, the walls smoother. Cirrus moved quickly, but Daniel could feel the tension in her posture. "You knew this was going to happen," he said. Cirrus didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, "I hoped I was wrong." Daniel exhaled. "What now?" Cirrus stopped in front of a large metal door. Unlike the others, this one was different. Old, rusted, covered in strange symbols. She turned to face him. "Now," she said, "we find the truth." Daniel felt his chest tighten. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And whatever lay beyond that door, it was going to change everything. The final choice. The metal door loomed before them, covered in strange, ancient symbols that pulsed faintly with a blue glow. The air around it was thick with something unseen. Energy, power, or maybe just the weight of history pressing down. Saris placed her hand on the center of the door, and the symbols flared brighter. The metal groaned as it began to shift, sliding apart in slow, grinding movements. Dust and stale air rushed out from the darkness beyond. Daniel clenched his fists. His mind was still reeling from the vision, the memories that weren't his but felt so real. He wasn't just some human caught in an alien conspiracy. He was a part of something ancient, something erased, something dangerous. Saris turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Once we go through this door, there's no turning back." Daniel exhaled. "I don't think we had the option to turn back a long time ago." She nodded, then stepped inside. Daniel followed. The chamber beyond was massive. The walls stretched high into the shadows, lined with the same glowing symbols. In the center of the room stood a circular platform, much like the one from before, but larger, more intricate, and surrounded by what looked like tall, crystalline pillars. Saris walked toward the platform, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. "This is what they've been trying to bury." Daniel stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over the structure. "What is it?" Saris placed a hand on one of the pillars. "A gateway." Daniel's stomach dropped. "A gateway to where?" Saris hesitated before answering. "To the truth." Daniel let out a frustrated sigh. "I'd really appreciate some straight answers right now." She turned to him, her expression finally breaking into something softer. "I know. And I promise you, this is the last time I'll ask you to trust me without explanation." Daniel crossed his arms. "All right. Start talking." Saris took a deep breath. "Thousands of years ago, humans and my people weren't just allies. We were connected. Our languages weren't just spoken. They were part of a greater system, a way of linking minds, thoughts, power. It wasn't just communication, it was creation." Daniel frowned. "Creation?" She nodded. "Together, we could shape reality itself. Not in the way you might think. Not magic, not technology. Something else. Something more fundamental." She gestured around the room. "This place, it's a remnant of that connection. A place where humans and my people once stood together and shaped the universe." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The memories flooding his mind made more sense now. The war, the betrayal, the fear. "The rulers erased it," he muttered. Saris nodded. "Because they were afraid of what it meant, what we could do." Daniel turned to face her. "And this gateway, what does it do?" Saris stepped onto the platform. "It will show us everything. The full history, the real past. And," she hesitated, "it will activate whatever is inside you." Daniel stiffened. "Activate?" Saris nodded. "The language, the connection. You're already feeling it, aren't you? The words come naturally. The symbols make sense." Daniel swallowed hard. He hadn't told her, but she was right. Since stepping onto the last platform, something had shifted inside him. It wasn't just understanding, it was remembering. And that terrified him. "Once we do this," Saris continued, "there's no undoing it. You will be the first human in thousands of years to awaken. And when the rulers find out..." Daniel's mind flashed to the soldiers storming the underground chamber, to the destruction, to the way the leaders had spoken about him. "They'll come after me," he said. Saris gave him a grim smile. "They already are." Daniel exhaled. His entire life had changed in the span of a single day. He had gone from a simple explorer to the key to an ancient war. He had learned that everything humanity knew about its place in the galaxy was wrong. He should have been scared. But deep inside, something else burned. Anger. They had erased his ancestors. They had rewritten history. They had buried the truth. And now, they wanted to erase him too. Daniel took a slow step forward. "Let's do it." Cirrus nodded and placed both hands on the pillar. Daniel did the same. The symbols on the walls flared to life. The entire room vibrated, and a low hum filled the air. The gateway activated. The crystals around them pulsed. The platform beneath their feet glowed. Then, everything went white. The first thing Daniel felt was weightlessness. He wasn't in the chamber anymore. He wasn't anywhere. A void stretched around him, endless and silent. Then, memories. Not just his own. A golden city, standing at the heart of an empire that spanned the stars. Humans and aliens working side by side, their minds linked, their knowledge shared. A power that didn't just control the universe, it shaped it. Then, betrayal. A faction within the alien rulers turning against their human allies. A war fought not with weapons, but with memory itself. A rewriting of history. The destruction of the human connection. The erasure of their place in the galaxy. A final command given by the last human ruler before the fall. "One day, one of us will return. And when they do, they will remember." Daniel gasped as he was pulled back. He collapsed onto the platform, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. Cirrus was kneeling beside him, her expression full of worry. "Daniel." He met her gaze, his mind still spinning. "I remember," he whispered. Cirrus's eyes widened. "Everything." Daniel nodded. "Everything." A deep silence settled between them. Then the door to the chamber exploded inward. Soldiers poured in, weapons raised. The rulers had arrived. Cirrus's hand tightened around Daniel's. "We have to go." Daniel rose to his feet, his body still shaking, but his mind clearer than ever. He wasn't just running anymore. He was fighting back. And this time, they wouldn't erase him. They wouldn't erase anyone. The war that had been buried in history was about to begin again. And this time, the galaxy was going to remember. The war begins. The chamber exploded into chaos. The metal door lay in twisted ruins, and through the smoke, dark armored soldiers stormed in. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy, the barrels glowing with blue light. Their eyes, covered by sleek visors, scanned the room like hunting machines. Daniel's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. This wasn't just an attack. It was an execution. Cirrus yanked him backward, her grip firm. "Move." The first soldier fired. A bolt of searing plasma shot through the air, missing Daniel's face by inches. The heat burned against his skin, but he didn't stop. He ran. Cirrus pulled him toward a narrow corridor at the side of the chamber. The glow of the ancient symbols flickered wildly, reacting to the surge of energy in the room. Daniel barely had time to process what had just happened. The memories from the gateway still burned in his mind. He knew the truth now. He wasn't just some explorer caught in the middle of a war. He was the war. The last remnant of a buried legacy, a forgotten key to a power the rulers had feared for thousands of years. And now, they wanted him gone. The corridor opened into a vast underground bridge. The walls were lined with towering crystal pillars, casting an eerie glow over the pathway. Below, a deep chasm stretched into darkness. There was no railing, no safety, just a straight path through the void. Cirrus didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward. "Come on." Daniel followed, his boots slamming against the smooth stone. Behind them, the soldiers were gaining. Blaster fire erupted, sizzling past Daniel's head. One bolt struck a crystal pillar, sending shards of blue energy flying through the air. Another bolt hit the ground behind them, scorching the surface. "We're not going to make it," Daniel shouted. Cirrus ignored him. She was focused on something ahead. At the end of the bridge, A large doorway stood open. Beyond it was a circular platform, carved with symbols, similar to the gateway, but different, older, more powerful. Daniel's breath hitched. It wasn't just a platform. It was a weapon. Cirrus reached the end first and slammed her palm against a nearby panel. The symbols flared with golden light. The entire chamber began to shift. The floor trembled. The crystal pillars pulsed brighter. The soldiers, now halfway across the bridge, hesitated. Cirrus turned to Daniel, urgency burning in her glowing eyes. "You need to activate it." Daniel froze. "What?" She grabbed his shoulders. "This is it. This is what they tried to bury. This weapon. It was meant for you. For our kind." Daniel looked at the platform. The symbols burned in his mind like a distant memory, something just out of reach. He could feel it, waiting for him. He had two choices: run or fight. He clenched his fists. He was done running. Daniel stepped onto the platform. The instant his foot touched the surface, the entire structure awakened. The symbols blazed to life, spreading outward like veins of fire. The crystal pillars vibrated, their energy coiling into the air. The bridge behind them shattered, sending the pursuing soldiers plunging into the abyss below. A massive shockwave erupted from the platform, rippling outward. The walls trembled. The air crackled with power. And then, everything stopped. A deep silence filled the chamber. Daniel stood in the center of the platform, his body tingling with unseen energy. He could feel it now, the connection, the power that had been locked away for generations. Cirrus stepped forward, her voice quiet. "You did it." Daniel looked down at his hands. His fingers trembled, but not from fear. From power. He had activated something ancient, something lost. And the galaxy had just felt it. Far above the underground chamber, in the highest towers of the ruling city, a figure stood before a massive window. The sky outside was dark, but something had changed. A pulse of energy had rippled through the world, through space itself. The figure, clad in flowing black robes, narrowed their glowing eyes. "It has begun," they murmured. Behind them, several high-ranking officials shifted nervously. "We must respond," one of them said. "If he has awakened the old power." The figure raised a hand, silencing them. "He is only one," they said coldly. "And one is not enough to change the fate of the galaxy." They turned, their gaze sharp as a blade. "Find him, and bring me his head." Back in the underground ruins, Daniel felt the shift. The energy within him wasn't just power, it was knowledge. It whispered to him, showing him visions of the past, of things yet to come. Cirrus watched him closely. "What do you see?" Daniel exhaled. "The rulers know." She tensed. "How do you?" "I just do." His voice was steady, sure. The knowledge was coming to him like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. "They're coming." Cirrus clenched her jaw. "Then we need to leave. Now." Daniel shook his head. "No." She frowned. "Daniel, I'm done running." Cirrus hesitated, searching his face. For the first time, Daniel wasn't confused. He wasn't afraid. He knew what needed to be done. He turned back to the platform, placing his hands on the glowing symbols. Cirrus took a step forward. "What are you?" "I'm sending a message," he said. Cirrus's eyes widened. "A message to who?" Daniel looked up, his expression unshaken. "To the rest of the galaxy." The platform pulsed brighter. The energy surged outward. The lost history, the erased truths, the power that had been buried, it was no longer hidden. Somewhere, across the stars, others like him would feel it. The rulers had spent centuries wiping humanity from history, but history was about to remember. And the war that had been buried for millennia was about to rise again. The final confrontation. The pulse of energy shot through the underground ruins, rippling outward like a silent storm. Across the planet, across the stars, something ancient stirred. A signal, a call, a warning. Daniel stood at the center of the platform, His hands pressed against the glowing symbols. His body trembled, but not with fear, with power. Knowledge flowed through him like a current, filling the gaps of history that had been erased. He wasn't just remembering, he was becoming. Saris stepped closer, her voice tight with urgency. Daniel, you just sent a message across the entire galaxy. Do you have any idea what you've done? Daniel lifted his gaze, his eyes glowing faintly with the same energy pulsing from the platform. Yes. Saris shook her head. The rulers. They already knew, Daniel interrupted. His voice was steady, unshaken. Now so does everyone else. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. The platform beneath Daniel's feet pulsed harder, the symbols flaring brighter. Then, a cold voice echoed from the darkness. Impressive. Daniel and Saris spun around. A figure stepped through the ruined entrance, cloaked in a dark, flowing robe. Their silver skin gleamed under the dim light, their tall form radiating power. Behind them, dozens of soldiers flooded into the chamber, their weapons aimed directly at Daniel. Saris's breath hitched. No. Daniel clenched his fists. Who is that? Saris's expression was grim. High Lord Vedris, the ruler of the Dominion. Vedris stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Daniel with cold amusement. The lost human who speaks our language. The mistake that should have been erased long ago. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Something primal. The knowledge in his mind told him exactly who this being was. Not just a ruler, but the one who had ordered humanity's erasure from history. The one who had rewritten the past to ensure that no human would ever rise again. Daniel met his gaze without fear. Then I guess your plan didn't work. Vedris smirked. For now. With a flick of his wrist, the soldiers raised their weapons. The chamber filled with the sharp hum of energy rifles. Saris tensed. Daniel. Before she could finish, Vedris spoke. Kneel. The air itself seemed to compress. A crushing force slammed into Daniel's body, forcing his knees to buckle. He gritted his teeth, fighting against it, but the weight was unbearable, like gravity itself was trying to break him. Vedris's voice was calm, almost amused. You think you are the first human to unlock the old power. You are nothing but a remnant. A failed experiment. The others thought they could resist me too. He leaned forward slightly. They all died screaming. Daniel's fingers dug into the stone platform. His head pounded, his vision blurred. But the symbols beneath him still glowed. He could feel them, the energy, the history, the strength of those who came before him. He clenched his fists. And then he pushed back. A shockwave exploded outward from the platform, sending the soldiers flying. The pressure on his body shattered, and Daniel surged to his feet. Vedris's smirk faded. Daniel exhaled sharply, his eyes still glowing. I'm not like the others. Saris lunged forward, grabbing a weapon from a fallen soldier. She spun, blasting two others before ducking behind a pillar. Daniel, we have to move. Vedris tilted his head. You don't understand, do you? Daniel narrowed his eyes. Enlighten me. Vedris lifted a single hand. The air rippled, and suddenly, the walls of the chamber vanished. Daniel's breath caught. They weren't in the underground ruins anymore. They were standing in the middle of a battlefield. Ships burned in the sky above. Soldiers clashed in the streets. Massive towers crumbled as explosions lit up the horizon. The echoes of screams filled the air. Daniel turned in every direction. What is this? Vedris's voice was smooth. The last time your kind tried to defy me. Daniel's pulse pounded. It wasn't real. He knew it wasn't real, but it felt real. The heat of the flames, the scent of burning metal, the cries of the dying. A memory. Not his own, but one given to him. Vedris took a slow step forward. This is your fate. The fate of every human who dares to rise above their place. Daniel clenched his fists. His breathing was heavy, his mind spinning. The power inside him was raw, untamed, but it was his, and he wasn't about to let some tyrant dictate his fate. He focused on the symbols, the energy, the truth. The illusion around him wavered. Vadris's expression darkened. No. Daniel smirked. Yes. And then, with a single thought, he broke the illusion. The battlefield shattered into a million shards of light. The chamber returned, and Vadris stumbled slightly. His control snapped. For the first time, his expression wasn't amused. It was furious. You dare. Daniel didn't let him finish. He lifted his hand, and the platform answered. The symbols flared blindingly bright, and a pulse of raw energy erupted from the ground, slamming into Vadris. The High Lord roared as he was sent crashing backward, skidding across the stone floor. The soldiers hesitated, uncertain. Ceres wasted no time. Daniel, now. Daniel turned, sprinting toward her. She threw him a stolen weapon, and he caught it just as more soldiers stormed in. The two of them moved together, ducking and weaving through fire, taking out enemies with precise shots. The chamber trembled. The platform flickered wildly. Daniel knew what was happening. The system was overloading, and they had seconds before this place collapsed. He turned back toward Vadris, who was rising to his feet, his robe in tatters, his glowing eyes filled with murderous rage. This isn't over, the High Lord growled. Daniel smirked. No, it's just getting started. Ceres grabbed his arm. Daniel, move. They sprinted toward the exit just as the chamber imploded. The explosion rocked the entire underground structure, sending shockwaves through the ruins. The walls cracked. The ceiling crumbled. Daniel and Ceres barely made it out before the entire complex collapsed behind them. They emerged into the night air, breathless and covered in dust. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ceres turned to him. You really don't do things halfway, do you? Daniel let out a shaky laugh. Guess not. She exhaled. They'll come for you now. The Dominion. The High Lords. You made yourself their greatest threat. Daniel rolled his shoulders, feeling the energy still humming beneath his skin. Good, he said. Let them come. Ceres studied him, then smirked. I think you just started a war. Daniel met her gaze. No, he said. I just finished one. The stars above burned brighter. The galaxy had finally remembered. And this time, humanity was ready.